Hi, friends, welcome back to True Crime Echoes. Today's story might sound unusual. At first, it starts with something as small as a stolen slice of pizza, but what begins as a simple case of leftover theft spirals into a legal battle that travels all the way through the branches of government and even lands in front of the Supreme Court. This isn't just a story about food, it's about how laws are made, how they're challenged, and how something that feels trivial can reveal bigger truths about fairness, property, and the systems we live under. So sit back, get comfortable, and let's unravel this unexpected journey together. Chapter 1. The Day My Pizza Disappeared. You know how sometimes the smallest things can feel like the biggest betrayals? That's exactly what happened to me not too long ago, and honestly, I'm still a little bitter about it. Someone stole one of the most important things in my life that day. And no, I'm not talking about money or jewelry or anything you'd normally consider valuable. I'm talking about my leftover pizza. Now, before you laugh, let me explain. This wasn't just any leftover pizza, it was the perfect pizza, the kind you save because you know tomorrow's lunch will be better just by having it. That box in the fridge was more than food. It was a promise, a bright spot in an otherwise ordinary day. I had made a whole evening out of it. I'd set myself up at home, cozy clothes, fuzzy socks, favorite show playing, and that glorious pizza waiting for me. The crust was soft, but had the right amount of crunch. The pepperoni glistened in that greasy, comforting way, and every bite felt like pure happiness. By the end of the night, I couldn't finish it all, so I carefully tucked the leftovers away, thinking tomorrow is going to be a good day. But the next day came, and that good day never happened. I went to work, put my precious pizza in the break room fridge, and told myself I'd see it at lunchtime. I even made a little mental date with it. Noon came around, and I was excited, almost giddy. I opened the fridge, and it was gone. Just like that. Stolen. I remember standing there, staring at the empty space where my lunch should have been, feeling this wave of disbelief wash over me. Who does that? We're all adults here. We all know the sacred bond between a person and their leftovers, yet someone without hesitation reached into that fridge and took what wasn't theirs. At first I laughed it off, but underneath I was angry. Angry in the way only people who've been robbed of something they were counting on can understand. It might sound silly, but in that moment it felt personal, like a tiny violation of trust. And the more I thought about it, the more it gnawed at me. Because if people can't respect something as small as leftovers, what does that say about bigger things in our lives? That's when a wild thought crossed my mind. What if there were a law about this? What if leftover theft wasn't just a petty workplace annoyance, but something you could actually get punished for? Imagine living in a country where stealing someone's pizza wasn't just rude, it was illegal. Of course, the rational side of me knew how ridiculous that sounded. But another part of me, the part still hungry and betrayed, thought, well, why not? After all, every law we have started with someone saying this isn't right and something needs to change. And that's where this strange journey really began. A journey that started with missing pizza but quickly turned into something bigger. A chance to understand how laws are made, how government works, and just how complicated it all is when you try to change the system, even for something as simple as leftovers. Chapter 2. The Roots of Rules. After that ridiculous pizza incident, I started asking myself a simple question. How does someone even get a law passed? I mean, the thought of turning leftover theft into a national crime was half a joke, half a hungry daydream. But it led me down a rabbit hole I never expected. I realized something embarrassing. For all the years I spent in school, for all the history classes I sat through, I couldn't honestly tell you how our government really works. I knew vague terms like checks and balances and three branches of government, but if you pressed me on the details, I'd probably mumble something about trees and balance beams. And I don't think I'm alone in this. Most of us only think about government when it's time to vote, and even then, it feels like we're choosing from a list of names without fully understanding the system they're stepping into. It's like being told to pick the captain of an airplane when you've never even seen the inside of a cockpit. You're left guessing, hoping you made the right choice. So I went back, way back to the very beginning. The year was 1787. The Founding Fathers had just cut ties with England and decided, fine, we'll do this ourselves. Out of that chaos, they built the Constitution. Think of it as the skeleton of the United States, a set of rules and boundaries meant to hold the young nation together. But here's the part that blew my mind. The Founding Fathers never saw the Constitution as something permanent and untouchable. They believed it should be updated, rewritten even every 20 years. Why? Because society changes, the world changes, and laws should reflect that. It makes sense, right? Imagine if they could see the world now: cars, smartphones, people fighting over leftovers in the break room fridge. I think they'd agree that the rules could use a little tweaking. At its core, the Constitution established the three branches of government: legislative, executive, and judicial. And this idea of separation of powers wasn't just fancy language, it was intentional. They didn't want one person or one group to hold all the power. So they created a system where each branch had its role and each one could keep the others in check. In theory, it's a brilliant design. In practice, well, let's just say things get complicated. But standing there thinking about my stolen pizza, it clicked for me. If I ever wanted to see this leftover law through, I'd need to understand those branches, how they work, and what it actually takes for a simple idea, no matter how silly, to become a real law. And so what started as frustration over a missing lunch became my excuse to peel back the curtain on how America is really run. Because maybe the best way to understand this big, messy machine we call government is to try and run something through it, even if that something is just a slice of cold pizza. Chapter 3, From Idea to Bill. So I had this leftover law idea swirling around in my head, but the first thing I needed to figure out was, how does an idea even get onto the government's radar? Can I just write it on a napkin, shove it in an envelope, and mail it to Washington? Surprisingly, the answer is kind of yes. Anyone can propose an idea for a law. You don't have to be a politician. You don't need a degree in political science, and you don't need to wear a fancy suit. But here's the catch: to make your idea legitimate, you need someone already inside the system to back you up. That's where representatives come in. Every one of us has a local representative in the House of Representatives. They're supposed to be the voice of their district, the person who carries our concerns to Congress. And to turn an idea into something real, you need one of them to sponsor your bill. Basically, you find someone in government willing to say, "This is a good idea, I'll help push it forward." Think of it like high school all over again. You might have a brilliant idea for a new club, but unless you get a teacher to sign off as your sponsor, your club isn't happening. It doesn't matter how passionate you are, you need that stamp of approval from someone with authority. Once you get a sponsor, your idea gets a new name. It's no longer just an idea, it becomes a bill. And a bill is basically the rough draft of a law. It's the version that gets carried into the halls of Congress, debated, dissected, and either strengthened or shredded apart. But here's where the process really begins to feel overwhelming. Congress isn't just one big room of people shouting at each other, though sometimes it looks like that. It's actually two groups, the House of Representatives and the Senate. Together, they make up what's called the legislative branch, and their job is to write the laws that shape this country. The House is massive, 435 members representing all 50 states. Big states like California get dozens of seats, while smaller states might only get one. Then there's the Senate, which is smaller and more exclusive, just 100 members, 2 per state, no matter how big or small. So here's how it works. Your sponsor writes up the bill in proper legal language. It has to sound official, not like a note scribbled on the back of a receipt. Then they submit it to the House. From there, the bill is sent to a committee that specializes in the subject. In my case, probably something like agriculture or food safety. Imagine a bunch of politicians sitting around debating whether leftover pizza counts as personal property. It sounds ridiculous, but this is literally how laws get made. And once a bill is in committee, anything can happen. They might tweak it, they might argue over it, they might even toss it in the trash and move on. But if it survives that stage, it gets a chance to be voted on by the entire House. It's kind of wild to think about, isn't it? Every law we live under, big or small, started as just an idea. Somebody got mad enough or inspired enough to put it down on paper, and with the right sponsor, the right momentum, and maybe a little luck, that idea can travel all the way to the heart of government. And for me, that ridiculous leftover pizza theft. Well, it wasn't just about food anymore. It was about proving that even something small could pull back the curtain on how power rules and fairness really work in this country. Chapter 4. Into the committee room. Once my leftover bill landed in the House, it didn't just go straight to a vote. Oh no, that would have been way too simple. Instead, it got sent to what's called a committee. And let me tell you, this is where the real drama starts. Committees are basically smaller groups of representatives who specialize in certain issues. Agriculture, education, energy, you name it, there's a committee for it. And because my bill involved food, it would have most likely gone to the Agriculture Committee. That's right, the same people who argue about farming subsidies and food safety were about to debate my leftover pizza law. Now, in theory, the purpose of a committee is to look at the details. They're supposed to ask questions like, at what point does food officially become a leftover? Is it when it's boxed up, or does it have to spend a night in the fridge? They dig into all those nitty-gritty details, things that most of us never even think about. But here's the messy part. Committees aren't just about logic or fairness. They're about politics. Everyone in that room has an agenda, and sometimes they care more about who owes them favors than about what the actual bill says. One representative might try to add a clause that benefits a certain company. Another might suggest changes just to slow the whole thing down. Suddenly, your clean little idea starts looking like a Christmas tree covered in too many random ornaments. And while they're debating, they can do one of three things. They can move the bill forward as it is. They can revise it and send out a new version. Or they can kill it right then and there. That's the brutal truth. Not every bill makes it out alive. Most die quietly in committee, never even reaching a vote in the full House. But let's imagine mine made it through. Maybe some representatives actually related to the idea. Maybe they'd had their lunch stolen once too and thought, you know what? Enough is enough. After all, laws aren't always born out of big world-shaking events. Sometimes they come from small, everyday frustrations. So after all the back and forth debates, and probably more than a little eye-rolling, my leftover bill survived. It was now ready to face its first real test, a vote in the House of Representatives. And this is where things get serious. Because once the entire House has their say, my little pizza law could either start climbing higher or be crushed under the weight of politics, egos, and compromise. Chapter 5. Facing the House Vote. So now, my leftover bill had survived the chaos of committee. That alone felt like a miracle, but the real challenge was just beginning. Because once a bill makes it out of committee, it goes to the House floor, and that's where every single member of the House of Representatives gets a chance to debate and vote. Picture this: 435 people from all across the country, each one representing their own district, their own people, their own interests. Some from big states like California, with dozens of representatives, others from small states with only one. They all bring their voices to the same room, and now my bill about leftover pizza was in their hands. Before a vote, the Speaker of the House decides when the bill is going to be debated. And once it's on the floor, things can get messy. Members can stand up, give speeches, argue for or against it, and even propose amendments. And let's be real, politicians love to talk. So sometimes debates can drag on for hours, even days. Now, for my leftover law, I can imagine the arguments. Some would probably say, "This is ridiculous. We're wasting time on pizza when there are bigger issues at hand." Others might actually back it, saying, "Hey, theft is theft, even if it's just leftovers. People deserve to have their food protected." And then, of course, there are the jokesters, the ones who'd probably make puns or turn it into a publicity stunt. Because yes, politics is serious, but it's also theater. Every speech is half about the bill and half about looking good for the cameras back home. Finally, after all the drama, it comes down to the vote. Every representative chooses yes or no. And here's the important part: if the majority votes yes, the bill passes. If not, it's done. Dead. No law, no protection for leftovers, no justice for my stolen pizza. But let's say against all odds, the majority actually said yes. My little leftover bill passed the House. That means it now has to move on to the next stop in the process, the Senate. And trust me, the Senate is a whole different world. Smaller, more exclusive, and in many ways, even tougher. Because if the House was like high school, loud, chaotic, full of cliques, the Senate is more like an elite club. Only 100 members, and they like to remind everyone of it. So with the House behind me, my bill was off to face the Senate. And this, my friends, is where things could really start to fall apart. Chapter 6. Entering the Senate. If the House felt like a loud cafeteria with hundreds of people shouting over each other, the Senate was more like an exclusive club. Only 100 members, 2 from each state, sitting in their polished chamber, acting as though their word carries more weight than anyone else's. And in a way, it does, because no bill can become law without passing through them. When my leftover bill landed in the Senate, it wasn't met with excitement. No, here the tone was colder, more skeptical. Senators like to think of themselves as the gatekeepers, the ones who filter out the nonsense that slips through the House. And let's be honest, a law about stolen leftovers probably looked like nonsense to more than a few of them. But here's the thing, the Senate operates differently. Bills get referred to committees just like in the House, but debates on the Senate floor can drag on forever thanks to something called the filibuster. If even one senator decides they want to stall, they can stand there and talk for hours, sometimes days, just to keep a vote from happening. And the only way to stop them is with 60 votes to shut it down. Imagine that 60 people, all agreeing to silence the chatter in a room where almost nobody agrees on anything. So I pictured it, one senator standing in the chamber going on and on about how my leftover bill was unnecessary, maybe reading recipes for pizza crust, maybe ranting about personal freedoms, and meanwhile the fate of my little law hung in the balance. But then again, some senators might see the bigger picture. It wasn't really about pizza, after all. It was about property, about fairness, about drawing the line between what belongs to you and what doesn't. Theft is theft, even if it happens in the break room fridge. And maybe, just maybe, that argument could win enough support. If the Senate managed to pass it, and that's a big if, the bill would finally leave the legislative branch behind. From there, it would head across town to the most powerful office in the country, the President of the United States. And that's when things could get very real. Because in the end, no matter what the House or Senate decided, it all came down to one person's pen. Chapter 7. The President's Desk. So after battling its way through the House and the Senate, my leftover bill finally reached the Oval Office. And let me tell you, it's surreal to think that something I dreamed up out of frustration over a stolen pizza of all things was now sitting on the President's desk. Here's the reality: when a bill makes it this far, the President has 3 options. The first is simple: sign it into law. With a single signature, my leftover bill would become part of the official rulebook of this country. That's huge. The second option, veto. That's the political equivalent of swiping left, tossing it in the trash, saying, "Nice try, but no thanks." And the third option is kind of sneaky, the pocket veto. That's when the President just lets the bill sit there ignored until it quietly dies without ever getting signed. It's strange, right? After all the debates, the votes, the committees, and the drama, the final decision rests with one person. One person who can decide whether your idea becomes the law of the land or just another piece of forgotten paper. I imagined the President looking at my leftover bill, probably laughing at first. I mean, who in their right mind takes this seriously? But then again, what if they thought about it differently? What if they saw it not as a joke, but as a symbol? A way to show that even the small, everyday problems like protecting something as simple as the food you worked hard for deserve recognition. And if the President did sign it, that would be it. My leftover law would be official. Suddenly, stealing someone's pizza at work wouldn't just make you a jerk, it would make you a criminal. But of course, nothing is ever that simple. Because once a law is passed, that's not the end of the story. Sometimes that's just the beginning. Chapter 8. Into the Courts. I thought passing the law was the finish line. I imagined people everywhere feeling safer about their takeout coworkers, thinking twice before opening the office fridge. But reality doesn't work like that. A law isn't really a law until it survives its first challenge. And sure enough, mine didn't take long to face its test. It all started with Reba. Yes, the same Reba, who I had always suspected of swiping my pizza in the first place. One afternoon, she was caught red-handed on camera, taking someone else's leftovers from the break room fridge. This time, though, things were different. Instead of just getting dirty looks or a nasty note taped to the microwave, she got handcuffed. The brand new leftover law made her crime official. And suddenly, Reba was staring down fines, jail time, and public embarrassment. But Reba wasn't about to go quietly. She got herself a flashy lawyer courtesy of a special interest group that wasn't thrilled with my law. They argued that arresting someone for eating a slice of pizza was outrageous, that it was cruel, unusual, and downright unconstitutional. According to them, my law went too far. So there we were dragged into federal court. On one side, lawyers insisting the leftover law protected people's property rights. On the other side, Reba's defense claiming that it trampled on personal freedoms. The courtroom felt like a circus witnesses telling stories about stolen sandwiches, ramen debates, breaking out, even expert testimony about what technically counts as a leftover. It was surreal watching my silly idea turn into a legal battle that real judges had to take seriously. But that's the thing about laws. Once they exist, they affect everyone, whether you think they're ridiculous or not. And in that courtroom, the stakes were higher than I ever imagined. Because if the judge ruled against the leftover law, it wouldn't just disappear from Reba's case, it would vanish for the whole country. Chapter 9: The Long Road to the Supreme Court. The first ruling didn't go my way, or at least not entirely. The federal judge declared the leftover law could stand, but hinted that maybe, just maybe, the punishment was too severe. A $5,000 fine and 69 days in jail for stealing a slice of pizza, according to the court, that felt excessive. Reba's lawyer pounced on that opening. They filed an appeal immediately, and suddenly, what started as a workplace squabble over cold pepperoni was climbing the legal ladder. Appeals court hearings followed, and with each one, the arguments grew bigger than me, or Reba, or even pizza. It wasn't about food anymore. It was about property rights, personal freedom, and where the line should be drawn. The media started to notice. Headlines screamed things like, "Pizza thief fights back," and "Can you really go to jail for leftovers?" Every step of the way, the case gathered more attention, and with it more controversy. Then came the twist I never expected. The Supreme Court agreed to hear the case. That's the highest court in the nation, the last stop, the final word. Out of thousands of petitions they receive each year, they take on less than 1%. And somehow my leftover law made the cut. I'll never forget walking up the marble steps of that massive building in Washington, D.C. The weight of history pressed down on me. 9 justices in black robes would soon decide whether my silly idea, born out of frustration in a break room, would remain the law of the land or crumble under the weight of legal scrutiny. In that moment, it hit me this wasn't about pizza anymore. It was about how laws are born, tested, and defined. And once the Supreme Court speaks their word, echoes through generations. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Chapter 10: The Final Verdict. The day of the Supreme Court hearing felt unreal. Walking into that chamber with its towering columns and solemn atmosphere, I couldn't help but think, how on earth did a stolen pizza slice bring me here? The arguments were short, just 30 minutes per side. Reba's lawyer stood before the justices, arguing that my leftover law was cruel, excessive, and a violation of basic rights. They painted Reba as a victim of an overreaching government punished far too harshly for something as small as a late-night snack. Then came the counter-argument. The defense of the law wasn't about pizza anymore. It was about respect, property, and fairness. They argued that a person's food, just like their home or their paycheck, is theirs alone. Taking it without permission wasn't a joke, it was theft. And theft, no matter how small, undermines trust in the community. The justices sat in silence, asking pointed questions. Could this law be abused? Did it set a dangerous precedent? Or did it finally address the everyday frustrations that so many of us quietly endure? Weeks later, the decision came down unanimous. 9-0. The leftover law was upheld as constitutional. I sat with the ruling in my hands, stunned. My frustration over a stolen pizza had sparked a nationwide debate, climbed through every branch of government, and ended in a Supreme Court decision. What began as a personal annoyance had become part of American law. And in that moment, I realized the deeper truth. Laws aren't just about grand historic issues. They're also about the small things that affect our daily lives. They start as ideas, messy, emotional, even petty, and through debate, compromise, and judgment, they become part of the structure that holds us together. So yes, it was about leftovers, but it was also about democracy, about how power works, how voices get heard, and how even the most unexpected stories can change the way we live. And maybe, just maybe, the next time someone reaches into a fridge that isn't theirs, they'll think twice.